In a slim volume of religious writings, Baha'u'llah addresses humanity, not as a spiritual guide, but through the voice of God himself. Composed in 1857, the hidden words distill key spiritual teachings from previous religions in a series of short, mystical passages. Baha'u'llah calls this work a treasury of divine mysteries, the secrets of which can only be discovered through meditation. This hidden word, number 19 from the Persian, resonates with me both personally and creatively, and I offer it as a starting point for some reflections on the artist's place in the community. O my friends, have ye forgotten that true and radiant morn, when in those hallowed and blessed surroundings ye were all gathered in my presence, beneath the shade of the tree of life, which is planted in the all-glorious paradise? Awestruck, ye listened as I gave utterance to these three most holy words. O friends, prefer not your will to mine. Never desire that which I have not desired for you. And approach me not with lifeless hearts, defiled with worldly desires and cravings. Would ye but sanctify your souls, ye would at this present hour recall that place and those surroundings, and the truth of my utterance should be made evident unto all of you. Since I first came across this passage, I've given up on original sin. Instead, I've pondered its opposite. What if we were all born into a state of original grace? When I was 5, 2 brothers came to redecorate our house. Mr. Simon was older, serious, and ran the business. He worked silently and efficiently, moving through the house with purpose. His brother was another story. He talked to me as he painted and showed me how he prepped the walls and rolled out wallpaper. Why are you writing on the floor and then covering it up with carpet? What are you writing? He scribbled some more and then stapled some more. It's a secret, he said. You'll just have to wait and see. I knew as well as he did that the day for pulling up the carpet would never come. I lived in that house another 7 years and never passed by that spot without speculating about the marks underneath. Even now, that memory retains its mystery for me. I figured out something that day. Mr. Simon painted houses, but Mr. Simon's brother had the heart of an artist. I stole through the house sometime after that with a thick black marker in hand. It was indelible, I found out later. I headed for the bookcases and marked up as many books as I could reach. Then I lifted the edge of a huge rug to scribble on the hardwood floor. And to keep it anonymous, I shut the cover. Since then, I've been fascinated by acts of personal expression, getting lost and getting found. I loved stories about pharaonic Egypt and the burned down library at Alexandria. I fantasized about Atlantis. I had fallen in love not with facts, but possibility. Not with history, but with art. Do you remember doing something big and loud and spontaneous just because you could, dancing because your body wanted to, or exploding into song? Think of a child's impulse to shout, ta-da! Not in a normal voice, but as loudly as possible and in public, just to say, look at me. What happens to this fleeting burst of exuberance? For a brief moment, a child experiences that ta-da when he knows to his core that he is beautiful, whole and brilliant, that he is more than a boy or girl, but a universe unto himself, self-contained, both loving and lovable. He knows his worth derives not from anything he's done or hasn't done, but from the accident of his creation. In this instant, the child remembers that true and radiant morn, and recognizes what so many of us have forgotten, that we really are enough. I think about applause and wonder when, as children, we first come to understand it, Toddlers start to clap their hands together well before connecting this action to praise. Why do some kids love applause and others find it terrifying? Applause both encourages and stifles creativity depending on the child, because it signals judgment. For one who expresses himself naturally, being judged can be alarming, and the pressure to maintain one's place in the sun unbearable. A young person's gift can become a burden as heavy as the language we use to describe important things. Think of it. They're weighty matters of substance, serious, solid, and quantifiable, that must amount to something of depth, significance, and gravitas. No wonder students come to me with increasing frequency, paralyzed with anxiety. By the time they enter college, many young artists expect to be experts. They refuse help if they're having trouble, terrified of revealing some weakness. Ironically, of course, their internalized pressure for perfection robs them of the chance to learn. I meet accomplished soloists who've turned their backs on music altogether, gifted writers crushed by the weight of their own talent. I've seen these writers work diligently, write 3 times as much as anyone else in class, but because it's not what they call their best work, they can't bear to turn it in. These are the students who've been haunted by masterpieces. They've forgotten that true and radiant morn, that state of grace that frees the spirit to create. If they could start over, I bet they'd take mediocrity over brilliance any day. We should take a lesson from the amateur. The amateurs are the people who pursue an interest with a lover's zeal because, as the word amateur tells us, they do what they do out of love. They've gotten a bum rap, of course, for being unprofessional, but it's often the amateurs who keep an art form alive and relevant to the lives of everyday people. I know a man, the father and grandfather of accomplished musicians, who wanted to become a professional musician himself. As a child, he would carve his own flutes out of wood, and his father would break them one by one. Each broken flute was a reminder that the boy should give up music and become a doctor. He did so, but not before learning to create the most delicate, melancholy music by whistling into his own hand. Generations later, and half a world away, the doctor hasn't let go of his music. Grace, we should remember, is not the same as reward. It cannot be earned or negotiated. It is a bounty to be enjoyed that surpasses our deserving. Consider the grace note, that momentary flourish tucked into a musical phrase to embellish its beauty. It's not fundamental to the line, but ornamental, a kind of luxury upon luxury. Artists are accustomed to hearing that their work is a luxury, or at least non-essential. That depends, I suppose, on whether we're talking about survival or civilization. To Plato's indictment of mimetic art as mere imitation of an imitation, Aristotle responded with a remarkable defense. He said, while the historian tells us what has happened, the poet does the nobler thing. He shows us what is possible. The ancients believed that the philosopher's job was to prepare to die well. Of course, to be able to die well, one must learn to live well. The artist, like the philosopher, must see the end in things. And to the student artist, who's acquiring skills to express himself, but may not yet know what to say, I pose another question. What would you die for? Once he's answered this, he will have found the answer to the question I'm really asking. What do you live for? The artist must see the connections, the irony, the relevance. The artist has got to see the point. She must constantly alternate between creative and actual time and allow her focus to expand or contract to accommodate a range of disparate subjects. For example, I recently learned that string theorists hypothesize that we may be living in as many as 13 dimensions. I was just trying to wrap my head around this when I remembered a story I had heard about the importance of human touch. Scientists studying infant mortality in Romania wanted to know why infants died even though all their bodily needs were being met. The orphanage staff was so busy feeding and changing the babies that they didn't have time to hold them. From this, the scientists concluded that infants will die if they're not held. Against the backdrop of 13 dimensions, the action of one person seems insignificant. And yet to the survival of our most vulnerable, an act as simple as holding a baby means the world. It's not what the artist sees so much as what he envisions that sets him apart. And this double vision can send him to a place of exile. Russian literature gives us a rich phrase to describe the person, generally a man, who as an intellectual or nonconformist cannot participate fully in society, but obsesses about it from a distance. This is the lishny человек, or superfluous man. With no real place in the community, he is misunderstood by the people who need him most. He is Tiresias, Cassandra, the shell-shocked soldier come home from war. Sitting in church as a girl, I had a vision. The large crucifix hanging behind the altar was on fire. Somehow I knew that these were special flames, like the ones Moses saw that burned the bush without consuming it. No one else in church reacted to the sight, and I relished it, hoping it would last, sensing it was meant for me. Tears rolled down my face, and when I saw the pastor afterward, I thanked him. As I shook his hand, I felt him recoil, as if by instinct, never acknowledging my expression. That response, I now realize, was not a mistake on his part, but his assigned role in my story. I had a lesson to learn that day, how it felt to be superfluous in the Russian sense, and his job was to disappoint. Once you've experienced another kind of vision, you seek it out again, wherever the search may lead. One celebrated example comes from the Arab romantic story of Layla and Majnun, retold in Persian verse with a Sufi interpretation, in which the lovers represent the seeker and God. Majnun, whose name means mad, is discovered on the ground, sifting through dirt, sending it into the air. When asked what he's doing, Majnun responds that as a true lover, he must seek his beloved everywhere. Like Majnun, the artist must live his life as if the goal of his quest is just around the corner, as if his Messiah has come. The artist lives in a continually reawakened state, working toward the world he envisions. He must live with double vision and in double time, in which he straddles the states of sin and grace, of facts and possibility, seeking out those points of relevance where real life and imagination converge. Creative time rules the world of the composition, the scene or choreography, demanding that the artist work both forwards and backwards, considering in detail how each element will contribute to a coherent work with its own internal logic and elements of surprise. Creative time expands and contracts, matching form to action, as we see in nature. Consider how a tree forms rings according to its growth pattern. A riverbed deepens to allow the flow of water over time. And wrinkles appear not suddenly, but over a lifetime of emotions. And those habitual movements of the face predict the form it will take in old age. In art, as in life, the action defines the form exactly. leaving no room for excess. 5 years ago, I was 2 weeks into a long-awaited sabbatical and couldn't get out of bed. With my feet dangling from the exam table, I told my doctor I had a whole year ahead of me to pursue work that really mattered, but was afraid I'd waste it all, not knowing how to start. What was the purpose of anything I was doing? What difference would it make if I never taught another student how to read a play? I asked her a question I already knew the answer to. Could I possibly be depressed? Since that day, and because of it, I struggle to get out of my own way. I've forged professional relationships that continue to sustain me and suggest new directions to explore. It's not the masterpieces that interest me now so much as the overlooked stories of artists. Through my conversations with colleagues around the world, I've discovered that we teach tough plays to let students experiment with nuance. Nuance leads to understanding and empathy, while generalities pave the way to fundamentalism and hate. Having taught theater history for almost 20 years, I have grown too fond of masterpieces. But I believe a good part of life depends on how you tell the story. And I like to think there's still time for me to find what the playwright August Wilson calls my song of self-sufficiency. The final line of that hidden word I read you contains a promise. Would ye but sanctify your souls, ye would at this present hour recall that place and those surroundings. I can't recall that place or those surroundings, but I try. It's a vision I hold in my head, and it keeps me moving forward. I remember my students who are too hard on themselves. I remember the tadas of my children, and a doctor who still got his music, a workman who was better at telling stories than stapling carpet, and a crucifix that burned for me. That true and radiant morn may mean something different to each of us, but to me it's a place where people bask in grace, not alone, but collectively, and everyone's an artist. Thank you very much.